Hey there, welcome to the first substantive lesson here in Module 2 about your catch email. Here in Lesson 1, we're talking about the fact that first impressions matter. And your catch email is your first impression, so we want to make sure that we make a good first impression. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this module generally, but also kind of in this lesson specifically. So here in Lesson 1, you're going to learn why you should not send a boring "here's your thing" email, the traditional delivery email for a freebie. You're going to learn the two purposes your first email to a new subscriber should serve. And you're going to learn how to navigate sending this in the overall journey with kind of what you're doing. And it's pretty simple on that last piece, but there's one little caveat I need to deliver. So there are two critically important reasons that you don't just want to send a boring quote, "here's your thing" delivery email. And you know what I'm talking about. Most people, when you sign up for a lead magnet from them and get on their list, they simply deliver it to you and say, "here's that thing you asked for." And that's about it. There's nothing more to it. You know, it's a 1 or 2 line email. Maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe there's a double opt-in, so they ask you to click to confirm or something like that. But that's it. They don't go deeper and they don't do anything. And I want to talk to you about why that is a huge, huge mistake. And there are two big reasons here. And the first one is this: your freebie delivery email will have sky-high open rates, so you don't want to squander the opportunity and valuable real estate. Think of it this way. If you had a billboard in Times Square that you had access to, you would want to use it. You wouldn't want to just leave it blank or be boring. You would want to actually use that to try to reach your people. Well, your freebie delivery email is kind of like that in your email marketing system. It is the email that will probably, barring something really weird, have the highest open rates of any email you will ever send to your list. That means it will get in front of the most people of any email you will ever send. So it is a chance that you have this truly valuable real estate. And so don't you want to make the most of it? Well, of course you do. You want to make the most of that space and get the most value from it. So that's the first really big, important reason to do it. Now, the next reason is that every email you send your list is training your audience. And the last thing you want to do is to train them that you are boring and should be ignored. And let me be clear. If you send an email that says, "here's that free blah, blah you requested," and that's it, you're training them that your emails are going to be blah and they're going to be boring. You're training them that the actual content of your emails is not going to have value to them. Now, it may not be something that they recognize that you're training them, but that's the effect it starts to have. So instead of that, you want to do the opposite. You want to train them that your emails, the content of the email itself, is incredibly valuable and has insight. And when you do that, you start to train them from the get-go to pay attention and to open your emails. That's what you do want to train your audience to do. And so that's kind of the big piece here as well. So that's the two kind of big pieces. But basically, I want you to remember this. You only get one chance to make a first impression, so make it count. That's what we're talking about here, is make this email valuable so it actually does some good. And there are two very important purposes that this email should serve. And luckily, in the next lesson, we will go through the structure. And when we go through the structure, it kind of ticks off these boxes and it does the work. But I want you to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it to help you gather what the importance is. And the two purposes come down to the important concept that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. So each of the purposes of the email is about upping the know, like, and trust factor with your audience from the get-go. Purpose 1 is that you use your first email to a new subscriber as a chance to build a connection as a way to build the know and like factors. Now, this is kind of, if you think about what we talked about in Module 1, it was really all about this, about building a connection so people feel like you're their friend, etc. And you just want to start that with the very first email. The important thing, though, is that what you're going to do is you're going to use the lessons from Module 1 to bring your voice, and you'll start to build the connection with that first email. Now, this one is not going to be in your face with a story. We'll talk about the structure in the next lesson. You're not going to necessarily use a story. You may use an analogy. You may use one of those villains you've identified in Module 1. But the important thing is that because this email is written in your voice, in your cadence, with your language, with all of those things, it starts the process of building the connection. Unlike here's your email, here's your free this. That doesn't do it. When you use your voice and say more and actually put something into it, it starts to build that connection because they're connecting with you and your voice. Now, the second purpose is that you use your first email to a new subscriber as a chance to establish your credibility as a way to build the trust factor. And this is something that I like to say that for the most part, most of what you are doing in your overall marketing plan, the trust factor comes from your content. You will create long-form content that will establish your expertise. Generally, that's how you will establish your expertise, and that's what ups the trust factor. Most of what we do in email marketing is actually about the first, the know and like factors. The catch email is different, though, because the catch email is going to establish that trust factor by setting the stage for your credibility. And here's how you do that. You establish your credibility by showing new subscribers that you understand their struggles, that you know where they are, and by including a brief credibility boost. Now, the first part there of showing new subscribers that you understand their struggles is critical here. There's that famous line that Bill Clinton said, "I feel your pain." That kind of empathy, that if you can get people to believe that you do, in fact, understand their struggles and feel their pain, that gives you an immense amount of credibility. Think about if you've ever interacted with someone who's able to describe you better than you could describe yourself. When that happens, that person has immediate credibility in your mind. That's what you're doing. One of the things you're going to do with the catch email, and we'll talk about that in the structure. And some of the pieces of it are all about doing that. Now, the second piece is a brief credibility boost. In other words, you're going to talk about yourself, but only for a little bit to help establish that you're the right guide. You're the right person to help them work through this thing. So those are the two purposes. Build a connection to up the know and like, and establish your credibility to up the trust factor. That's what your catch email is going to do. Now, ideally, you accomplish this in the freebie delivery email itself. And this is what I was talking about when I said the sequencing, where do you put it all together? If you have a PDF, any kind of downloadable thing, or a link just to here's a link to go download this thing, your delivery email itself will be the catch email. That's going to be the case for 90+% of you, 90+% of the time that you send a catch email, it will be this way. Sometimes if someone is signing up for a webinar or a password protected membership area, you're going to have a second email. For example, you don't generally want to use, we use Demio in-house as our webinar software. I would not want Demio to send my catch email because there's a lot of things it can't do and doesn't have functionality. So they're going to get that login for the webinar, and separately they're going to get an email from me through my Kartra email service provider. So sometimes you'll have to do two emails, but that's kind of in the rare case. Generally, you want it to be your delivery email because that's the email that most people will open the most. And so you generally want to do it in a single email, but sometimes in a few different circumstances, you might not want to do it if you just can't do it for one reason or another. And normally, like I said, it will happen if you have a if they signed up for like a mini course and that is hosted, let's say you use Teachable to host your mini courses, again, that's not going to be your catch email. They will get those login credentials and separately you'll send them a catch email. So those are the circumstances where it's going to be a different email. Now, the key lesson takeaway here is that first impressions matter. So use your first email to new subscribers to build a connection and your credibility. That's it in a nutshell. That's what we're doing with this catch email. Now, in the next lesson, you'll learn the 5-part catch email structure, the role served by each part of the catch email, and how to craft your own catch email. I'll see you in the next lesson.